Welcome to this edition of Under the Radar for Saturday, April 1st. And no, this will not be an April Fool's edition, although you may get that impression from some of the stories I'm going to talk about this week. But first, I wanted to address a video I put out during the week called Social Justice is Winning. Now, there was some healthy disagreement on that video. Some of you claimed quite the opposite. Now, I'm encouraged by the fact that some of you disagree because it means that at least some of you haven't given up. It doesn't mean you're right, you could just be in denial. But I get the sense that a lot of you are not going to go down without a fight. And I want to let you know that I feel the exact same way. Saying that social justice is winning is not the same as saying social justice has won. This is an ongoing battle, and I wouldn't be part of it if I didn't think we could prevail. But more on that later. So let's get on to today's stories, which are all about the continued lunacy on college campuses. Student has grade docked for using mankind in English paper. A Northern Arizona University student lost credit on an English paper for using the word mankind instead of a gender-neutral alternative. Kaylin Jeffers, an English major at NAU, told Campus Reform that she received an email from one of her professors, Dr. Ann Scott, informing her that she'd been docked 1 point out of a possible 50 on a recent paper for problems with diction, word choice, related to her use of the word mankind as a synonym for humanity. Yeah, I can tell you, if I received that type of comment on a paper of mine, that professor would have a real problem with some of my word choices. And this wasn't a surprise to the student in question because the professor had actually given the class a list of do's and don'ts after their first essay. One of those do's was that they had to use gender-neutral language, and she specifically cited the mankind, humankind example. Now, Caitlin thought this was absurd and wasn't even sure if the professor was serious. So she decided to test the policy on her next paper by including 2 instances of the word mankind. And when the paper came back with the requisite points taken off, she requested a meeting with Scott. I stated that I agree with everything she said about my paper except the use of mankind. She proceeded to tell me that the NAU English Department as well as the Modern Language Association are pushing for gender-neutral language, and all students must abide by this, Jeffers recalled. She told me that mankind does not refer to all people, only males. I refuted, stating that it does refer to all people, but she proceeded to tell me that I was wrong. Mankind is sexist, and I should make an effort to look beyond my preset positions and ideologies, as is the focus of the class. Oh, the irony of that statement. Look past your ideologies. So let's have a look at a few dictionaries. Dictionary.com. Noun. 1. The human race. Human beings, collectively, without reference to sex. Humankind. Merriam-Webster. Definition of mankind. 1. The human race. The totality of human beings. How about Oxford? Human beings considered collectively. The human race. And Cambridge. The whole of the human race, including both men and women. So the learned professor's claim that mankind does not refer to all people, only males, seems to conflict with probably every dictionary on the planet. But a bit of history might help here. Man was used basically the same way as the word person is used today, up until about 1,000 years ago, and it wasn't until the 20th century that it was used to refer exclusively to males. Now, this also tells you that language changes over time, so language may evolve to the point where humankind becomes common parlance, but not because some agenda-driven ideologues deem it so, rather because it's adopted into common usage just like mankind is used today. And you have the obvious problem that the word human and woman, for that matter, likewise contain the word man. So are they not sexist words too? And I wonder if the good professor's stance on gender-neutral language extends to words like Mother Nature. Later in the article, the professor vehemently denies that gender-neutral language is merely a question of political correctness, pointing out that both the Modern Language Association and the American Psychological Association have put out guidelines promoting gender-neutral language. Well, that just could mean that both those organisations have been captured by the gender neutrality extremists as well. The most galling part of this story is chiding the student about looking beyond preset positions and ideologies. I think it's your ideology, Professor, that is preventing you from accepting that both humankind and mankind are perfectly acceptable terms. Now, of course, campus lunacy is not limited to the professoriate. Plenty of students have lost their minds as well. Take this story again from Campus Reform. Student creates database to report profs for microaggressions. A Wellesley College student has created a public database of professors who commit ableist microaggressions or fail to respect students' pronoun preferences. I know invoking the 1984 analogies is getting old, but seriously, this is like the children that were hailed as heroes for reporting their parents to the thought police after making some compromising remarks, and the parents actually lived in fear of their own children. The non-PC professors are now living in fear of their students. The project, Wellesley Professors and Students' Mental Health, was launched on Friday by Wellesley junior Elizabeth Engel, who told Campus Reform she was inspired to create the project after experiencing difficulties with professors herself. As a mentally ill student, it's always been kind of frustrating to find out whether a professor is good about dealing with mental illness, she explained, adding that students had no way of knowing which professors to avoid before she created the public directory. According to Engel, encouraging students to name and shame professors is one way of addressing this and helping students with mental health issues find the best professors for their needs. Well, I'm not going to argue about your mental illness. You'd have to be disturbed to come up with a list like this. The submission form begins with predictable prompts such as rating the professor's handling of their condition on a scale of 1 to 10 and indicating whether the professor was generally good about the specific accommodations the student required, such as extensions on exams and assignments. It then turns to trendier concerns that students might have, such as whether the professor respected students' preferred pronouns or ever used ableist microaggressions.
I'm not doing it.
Since Wellesley's a women's college, many professors refer to students as women without hesitation, but Engel contends that this automatic assumption is exacerbating the problem of mental illness on campus. Actually, I think you're exacerbating your own mental illness by exaggerating a non-problem. Many of her friends identify as non-binary, and because of this, many professors misgender them, Engel explained, arguing that the practice creates a toxic environment for students and corrupts their learning environment. Look, it should go without saying, if you feel being called a woman at a women's college creates a toxic environment and corrupts your learning, then you're not going to make it in the real world. You can't wrap yourself in cotton wool and then expect that you're ready to meet the challenges of an increasingly competitive job market. Well, at least at Wellesley, you don't have to worry about dealing with those horrible misogynist males that might want to start, say, a men's group or something. Just like at Plymouth University in England. Plymouth Uni rejects men's rights student group. In an example of the type of sexism men now regularly have to endure, Plymouth University Student Union has turned down a student's request to set up a men's forum, as they say men don't suffer discrimination. Well, of course they don't. Will Stiles, a third-year architecture student, said he wanted to tackle campus issues like men's mental health and male suicide. There's not a lot happening on campus for that, or for sexual harassment of men, or false sexual harassment accusations. In a statement, a student union spokesman, wait a minute, did you just assume that spokesperson's gender? Said the uni's equal opportunities policy must be read in the context of the relevant equal opportunities legislation. That legislation, both in its initial form and as subsequently amended, is specifically designed to address equal opportunities for groups which have suffered historic and ongoing discrimination. Those groups did not and do not include men. Oh yeah, like women really suffer ongoing discrimination. Now, the author of this piece included a clip of Milo wrapping up a debate he had at Bristol University in 2015, which you may have seen before, where he addressed the young men in the room, and I think it's still fitting to play it here.
I want to address the men in the audience. Sorry, ladies, I love you, but this is for the boys. The question posed to us today was whether we've reached an age of gender equality. I don't think we have. We've overshot the age of gender equality by a long stretch, and men of your generation are going to be the primary victims of this error. In secondary school, you will have experienced a system that is tilted against boys. Your exams will have been primarily modular, not linear, a system that favours girls. Teachers will have tried to control and pathologise your boisterous behaviour, branding you young offenders for pranks or cyberbullies, for typical male teenage trash talk. Taunting, after all, is how men bond. Your female peers will be encouraged at every stage of their educational journey They will be told to join a STEM field. They'll be showered, in fact, with grants and awards, prizes, and encouragement. And then when they do get to applying for those jobs, you will be discriminated against just because they're a girl. You'll be the recipients of nothing. There are no programs for men. The suggestion of having a men's officer at York University was laughed at by the student union. At university, you will be told that you're rapists in waiting, that you need to attend consent classes. Your natural love and affection for women will be neutered. You will be faced with an impossible choice: suppress your natural, healthy romantic interest in women or risk a charge of rape or sexual harassment. If you speak out against this hostile and unfair environment, you will be persecuted by rabid mobs of politically correct lunatics, as well as the full force of the establishment media as well. When your studies are completed, you'll enter a jobs market that is stacked against you. With companies pressured from all directions to hire women, you will be at a 2-to-1 disadvantage if you are in STEM subjects, and possibly worse in others. If you do happen to land a job, a single inappropriate remark or a single accusation of an inappropriate remark or any unsubstantiated allegation can destroy your reputation forever. Despite all this, I'm not worried for you, because you're men. Your incalculable, intolerable, impossible obstacles have been placed before you precisely to overcome. And overcoming is what men do best. It's in the nature of men to battle on under impossible odds. We do that in war, we do that in all sorts of things, and we will do it here. Throughout your education, you will have been fed a grim history of what men have done through the centuries. You'll be told that straight white men are worse than the Nazis. You'll have been told nothing good about your sex, your race, or your orientation. But I'm going to tell you something good, and it is, if the patriarchy exists, women should be grateful for it. It is what took us to space. It is what builds roads. It is what built the internet. It is what protects and provides for women. If it exists, thank God it does. With their strength and determination, men have tamed the wilderness. Men built cities and walls around us. They built the buildings that we're in. Their curiosity led us to explore the oceans. Their ingenuity has allowed us to reach the moon. And whenever, feminism rises up and tries to ridicule you, to demean you for what you are, and, it's interesting, like, I was going to talk at this university, right, and I was called by my interlocutor a troll. She said it would demean the institution to have me here. When she talked about a Sunday Times article by a respected journalist, she sought to demonize him, even though he's not here to defend himself. She said Martin Daubney was a bad person. Martin Daubney is a close friend of mine. He's a great person. He spent the last 5 years of his life advocating for the rights of men and boys. But this is what they do. Don't pay any attention to it. Don't listen to it. We're not in an age of gender equality. Straight white women in the West are the most privileged class in the history of our species. But you'll be fine.
Now, although we're often behind the times down here in Australia, we're doing our best to catch up in the snowflake stakes. Monash University trigger warning policy fires up free speech debate. Monash University has become the first in Australia to implement a policy of trigger warnings. In its pilot program, 15 of the university's course outlines carry the warnings of potentially emotionally distressing content.
Oh, Jesus!
The university says political correctness played no part in its decision, but critics say it is a concession to students demanding to be shielded from ideas they disagree with. Yes, the critics have it right. The pilot involves the university asking its academics to review course content looking for emotionally confronting material in the discussion of sexual assault, violence, domestic abuse, child abuse, eating disorders, self-harm, suicide, pornography, abortion, kidnapping, hate speech, animal cruelty, and animal deaths, including abattoirs. So in other words, large chunks of reality. This will allow students to prepare themselves. The policy is the culmination of years of campaigning by the university's Student Association. Union President Matilda Gray dismissed criticism of the move, saying the current generation of students was simply more aware of the range of experiences of their peers that included, for example, those who've been traumatised by sexual assault or other violent crime. That's what it is. You see, they're more aware, even though they are less likely to have experienced any of those things than any other generation in history. We're not suggesting that students shouldn't be faced with challenges during their uni experiences, she said. Oh no, you just want to face micro challenges, like getting out of bed in the morning. Now, it's good to see that some academics are already pushing back. Marguerite Johnson from Newcastle University says she thinks Monash University's threshold of emotionally distressing sets the bar ridiculously low. Life is potentially, inevitably, regularly, emotionally distressing, she said. The world is emotionally distressing, and I find it quite absurd that the universities may see themselves as the guardians of emotionally distressing situations. Well, you haven't been paying attention to what's happening in America then. She believes warning students about texts interrupts the way they approach and interpret works. If we're warning them all the time, then we're creating a preconceived notion that this material is going to upset me, Associate Professor Johnson said. Yes, and not only that, it doesn't work anyway. Here's that clip of Jonathan Haidt again, trying to explain that to a special snowflake at NYU.
But first, I would question, is there any evidence or reason to think that giving content warnings or trigger warnings actually will do this? As a psychologist, I've been looking into this, and the more you label things as potentially threatening, the more they develop a certain power to actually threaten. So think about it this way. I teach classes in the business school here. Suppose I took my students on field trips all over New York. But every time we went to the Bronx, I said, now, today, we're going to the Bronx. Just want to let you know, we'll have an ambulance with us, we'll have police protection, but don't worry about it, we're going to the Bronx. And I only do that for the Bronx. What are people going to conclude about the Bronx? Now, if there was evidence that these warnings actually helped people get over PTSD, then we'd have to balance various things. But there isn't, and the therapists that I talked to, the people who study PTSD, were unanimous in saying that if someone has PTSD, the last thing you want to do is shield them from small reminders. In fact, the only way to get over the Pavlovianly conditioned fear is to let them be exposed to small things, and then nothing bad happens to them, and that's how the fear subsides. So I'm totally fine with being really explicit on the syllabus. We're going to cover these things. Of course, let people know before they join. But if in the course of daily teaching, you say, we're about to look at something that shows this, that, or the other thing, content warning, you're actually hurting the very people you want to help.
The good thing about being behind the US with respect to this kind of stuff is that we've been able to witness the toxic effects, but it remains to be seen if our universities will actually heed the warning. So that's going to do it for this week's edition of Under the Radar. If you enjoyed this week's episode, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, or consider supporting the channel on Patreon. See you next time.